All right, here's a video for our first homework assignment, homework 2.5. I'm going to do this for all of the homework assignments where I just spend a few minutes, go pretty quickly through them, and just talk briefly about all the different questions. Sometimes there's little tricks or weird notation or something like that that I'll want to highlight for you just to try to make it easier when you go around and do these. So you don't have to watch these videos if you don't want, but if you find yourself struggling with the homework, it might be worth 5 or 10 minutes of your time to watch them to save, I don't know, maybe more than 5 to 10 minutes as you work through the problems. At any rate, the first problem, we have x approaches -3 from the positive side. Be a little bit careful there when you're thinking about -3 from the positive side. -3 is over here on the number line, and from the positive side means you're coming in this direction. So maybe think, I don't know, -2.999. A lot of times people see this from the positive side and they want to make this number a little bit bigger. And technically, -2.999 is bigger than -3, but a lot of people think -3.0001 would be a little bit bigger than -3. At any rate, this is kind of what you're thinking here. We got -3 from the positive side. The top, the sign of this should be pretty obvious, whether it's positive or negative, but the bottom will be a little bit trickier. So think about if you're plugging in a number like this to this expression. If you added 3, would it be positive or negative? And then if you raise it to the fourth power, would it be positive or negative? And then if you have a negative over a positive, or a positive over a positive, or a negative over a negative, or whatever, that can help you figure out whether the answer is positive infinity or negative infinity. And the answer is going to be one or the other, as you should not be surprised if you watch the lecture videos on these things. It says enter infinity or negative infinity for your answers. What they mean by that is it'll give you an option to type in those symbols. So there's infinity, and then a negative in front of that would be negative infinity. Same idea here. Second question, not too much to add. We're approaching 4 from the positive side this time, so do the same analysis. Know that there's a third part here. We approach 4 from the positive side, then 4 from the negative side, and then we just approach 4. In case you don't remember this from Math 251, the idea here is this answer will always be undefined unless you get the exact same answers here and here. So if you get the same answer here and here, that is your answer down here. But if you get different answers here and here, then the answer here is undefined. And you're like, how do I type in undefined? Fortunately, it tells you how in this problem. Capital DNE apparently does the trick. Third one is just like the second one with slightly different numbers. We're approaching -5 from the positive side. So think -4.9999 if you want. -5 from the negative side. So think -5.0001. And then see if those answers match up. If they do, great. If they don't, does not exist. Question 4 and 5 are a little bit harder here. So here is where hopefully I can save you some time. If you look at this mess and you see this quadratic trinomial, you might immediately try to factor, because that's what you did in Math 251. Don't try to factor the numerator. It's a mess. They're horrible. You'll have to factor the denominator in these problems. And the reason why is the denominator is going to approach 0 when x approaches 7. So what that means is x minus 7 is one of the factors in the denominator here. And it'll help you to determine the sign, whether it's positive or negative, by factoring the denominator. So you'll be factoring the bottoms, but those should be fairly easy. The tops, don't factor the top. Just figure out whether it's negative or positive. So on question 4, for example, if I'm plugging in a number slightly less than 7, so more or less 7 squared is more or less 49. 48 times 49 is some huge number. I don't know what it is, but it's really, really big. It's quite a bit bigger than 34 times 7, or just 7 itself. So I'm going to have this huge positive number, and then I'm going to subtract a little bit and a tiny bit more. I'm going to end up positive up top. For question 4, with my numbers, your numbers might vary. All you need to know is that the top is positive. The bottom, we'll have to be a little bit more careful. You'll want to factor this out, and you'll end up with 2 different factors here. And you'll want to look at those 2 different factors and figure out whether they are positive or negative. And so maybe if this is negative and this is negative, then the bottom's all positive, and positive divided by positive would be positive. But if this is negative and this is positive, well, you can do the analysis. Same idea on question 5. 20 times 4 is a lot bigger than 6 times 2 and 2. So this huge positive number, I'm just subtracting little bits. The top's going to be positive again in this case. Note that your numbers may vary, and that might change the sign on these things. But you should be able to do similar analysis on the numerators just to figure out the sign. You don't have to figure out the value. Factor this out. One of the factors is going to be x minus 2. I know that because the denominator is going to approach 0, and that means x minus 2 must be a factor. Maybe you learned that in Math 111. And that's why this is either approaching infinity or negative infinity. Anyways, that's the first 5 questions. They're kind of the first type of question that you see, the ones where the answers are always infinity. You just have to figure out if it's negative infinity or positive infinity. The remaining questions are where you have infinity in the question itself. So these answers typically aren't infinity. But the way you analyze these, maybe you are able to look at this and just tell what the answer is from like a Math 111 course. But ideally, you'd at least be able to write the steps. You don't have to do it every time, but you'd have the ability to. You'd understand that you could divide each of these four terms by x in this case, because the largest power of x you see is just x to the first power. 1 over x, 10, 4 over x, negative 3, if you divided everything by x. And 1 over x and 4 over x are going to approach 0 when x approaches infinity. And 10 and negative 3 will just be 10 and negative 3. I think you'll get 10 over negative 3 for this first one. In other words, negative 10 thirds. Do similar analysis on the rest of these guys. Here you'd be dividing by x squared because that's the largest power of x you see. Here x cubed. And be a little bit careful. Typically, polynomials are written in decreasing order of their exponents. But now down here in the denominator, it's not. Don't let that mess you up. They're just throwing the 2x cubed over here. It's negative just because they can. Question 9, same idea. X squared is the largest power you see. This one, I think I did a video where it's kind of like, I think we saw an example that's kind of like this in one of the videos. It's a little bit tricky because I think, well, I'll let you figure it out. Then this last one, number 10, the last problem on the homework, it's always extra credits. You don't have to do this if you want. What I do to make these is I try to pick something that's a little bit beyond what I taught you, related to, but a little bit harder, tangentially related to. I always try to pick something that you can do if you want, but you don't have to do. It's purely extra credit. On this one, you evaluate this limit. Part A should be just like what you've done in the previous problems. But part B gets a little bit different, a little bit interesting maybe. So what you need to know is this EXP, it means E raised up to this power. So I'm going to figure out the behavior of the power itself, and then I'll have to think about, based on that behavior, what would happen if I did E raised up to that power. So maybe your knowledge of exponents will come in here. If you know the limit in A, maybe you can figure out the limit in B. If you can get it, great. And if you can't get it, it's not that big of a deal. Question 10 typically won't be things you'd ever be tested upon. Question 10s will just be extra credit stuff. And that's the first homework.